In a world where scent and strength determine one's worth, the weak are discarded without a second thought. One life holds no value at all. She is the pack's invisible shadow, an omega born without a scent, nothing more than a ghost destined to be overlooked. When a wounded, helpless wolf pup is left to die, the warriors and alphas ignore it, deeming it too feeble to save. But one person who knows what it's like to be cast aside, the scentless omega, takes the risk to bring it home. She has no idea that the pup is a royal heir, and that every move she makes is being watched by the most ruthless and powerful alpha king in the land. A king who has just discovered the one thing he never knew he was searching for. The rain fell relentlessly cold and sharp, soaking Vexa's thin tunic and sticking it to her skin. It was the kind of rain that chilled you to the bone, reminding you of your insignificance. For Vexa, it was just another miserable day in the Crimson Fang Pack, where insignificance was her entire reality. She was an outcast, a curse spoken of in hushed whispers by the pack elders. An omega born without a scent in a world that communicated through the language of pheromones. Power, submission, attraction, family. Vexa was a blank slate mute. Her presence was a void that made others uneasy, like a ghost they couldn't even see. And so she was treated as one ignored, forgotten, and utterly alone. Tonight, the pack was celebrating. Alpha Thorn had led a successful hunt, bringing down a massive stag that would provide for them for the next week. The feasting hall rang with triumphant howls, guttural laughter, and the sound of tearing flesh. Vexa stood near the kitchens just outside the main hall, hoping for any scrap of food that might be tossed her way. The savory scent of roasted meat and the warmth of the pack was a cruel reminder of what she would never have. Through the crack in the door, she saw Kyra Thorn's mate laughing as Thorn draped a prime cut of meat over her shoulders. Other wolves jostled for position, their pride and ambition filling the air. They were a vibrant mosaic of life, and she was the worn, frayed edge of the fabric about to unravel. A sudden disturbance on the edge of the clearing caught her attention, but it was quickly ignored. With nothing else to do, Vexa leaned in to see what was happening. There beneath a dripping pine, a tiny, trembling ball of fur lay. A wolf pup. Its silver coat was caked with mud, and something darker, a scent of blood that felt wrong even to her dulled senses. One of its back legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and it whimpered in pain, its sound swallowed by the storm. A few warriors swaggered by, ignoring it. One, a burly enforcer named Jarek, nudged the pup with his boot. "Worthless thing," he grunted, "a weakling like that won't make it through the night," before heading back to the warmth of the hall. Kyra and her circle of friends noticed the pup as well. How pathetic, Kyra sneered, wrinkling her nose in disgust. Someone should put it out of its misery. It's ruining the celebration. No one stepped forward to help. No one offered comfort or even a kind word. In the ruthless logic of pack life, a broken creature like that was nothing but a burden, a waste of resources. It was nature's law. The strong survive and the weak perish. Vexa knew this law all too well. She was living it. A flicker of something long buried, a spark of defiance, stirred within her. She watched as the pup tried to stand, only to collapse again, with a heart-wrenching cry. She saw herself in that broken, discarded body, ignored, abandoned, left to die. The pack saw weakness. She saw herself. Her heart pounded in her chest. Helping the pup would mean drawing attention. It would mean breaking the unspoken rule that had defined her entire existence. Stay invisible. If she stepped out of line, they might punish her, humiliate her, or worse. But as she looked at the pup's trembling form, and then at the mocking faces in the feasting hall, a cold, determined resolve settled within her. They had already taken everything from her. Her name, her dignity, her hope. They couldn't take her spirit. Her movements were cautious but sure. She slipped away from the kitchen, her head down and her shoulders hunched, the familiar posture of an omega, but her steps were no longer hesitant. As she knelt beside the pup, it flinched, showing tiny helpless teeth. Shh, little one. She whispered, her voice rough from years of disuse. I won't hurt you. Expecting it to fight or snarl, she was surprised when the pup collapsed into her touch, its whimpering softening into a low, desperate whine. Gently, Vexa lifted the small, fragile creature into her arms. It was shockingly light. Wrapping her thin tunic around it to shield it from the rain, she held the injured pup against her chest and moved away from the warmth and laughter of the pack. She headed toward the dilapidated shack at the edge of the territory she called home. She didn't look back. She didn't see the few wolves who noticed her actions, nor the cold flicker of contempt in their eyes. And she certainly didn't see the figure watching her motionless as a statue in the high branches of an ancient oak tree far beyond the clearing. He was cloaked in shadows, his presence so immense and controlled that it passed unnoticed by the pack. His molten gold eyes missed nothing. He had witnessed the warrior's callousness, the pack's cruelty, and the indifference of his people. And then he had seen her, the ghost, the scentless Omega, whom he'd heard whispers of. He watched her defy the savage nature of their kind, her small act of compassion, standing out in the storm of callous cruelty. He watched as she carried the pup away, a fragile flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness. Raylan Alpha King, of all the packs in the Northern Territories, lowered his gaze. The pup she held wasn't just any stray, it was his nephew, Prince Kalen, the only other heir to the throne. He had just watched the pup be saved by the one person no one else had even cared to see. Vexa's hovels was nothing more than a ramshackle hut, small and drafty, made of woven branches and mud that did little to keep out the storm. But tonight, it felt like a sanctuary. She gently laid the pup down on her only blanket, a worn piece of wool, and quickly stoked the fire in her hearth. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls, filling the small space with warmth and safety. There she murmured, her voice soft as she looked down at the pup. Let's see what we're dealing with. Up close, the pup's condition was worse than she had feared. His silver fur was matted with blood from several shallow cuts, and his leg was clearly broken. But it was the sluggishness in his movements, the faint tremor that ran through his body, that worried her most. The pup looked up at her with eyes the color of a summer sky, full of pain and exhaustion, but also trust. For the first time in years, Vexa felt a sense of purpose. Her life of servitude had taught her many things: how to tend to wounds, how to heal the sick tasks others avoided. With focused concentration, she cleaned the pup's wounds, her fingers surprisingly steady as she applied comfrey and yarrow to the cuts. She set the broken leg as best as she could, using 2 straight sticks and strips of her tunic to create a makeshift splint. Through it all, the pup didn't struggle. He simply watched her, his gaze steady and full of trust. When she finished, she offered him a small bowl of water, which he drank weakly. His body trembled still, so she lay down beside him on the cold, hard floor, curling her body around his small, fragile one. His soft fur brushed against her cheek, and slowly his trembling began to subside as he drifted into a peaceful, exhausted sleep. Lying there, in the dim light, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, Vexa felt something shift deep inside her, a crack in the wall of ice that had surrounded her heart for so long. She named him Kalen, after the color of the sky in his eyes. Miles away in a cave hidden behind a waterfall, King Raylan was not at rest. His 2 most trusted guards, Xander and Nyx, stood before him, their faces grim. "We found the wreckage, Your Majesty," Xander reported, his voice low and gravelly. "The carriage was ambushed on the northern pass. The royal guardians fought to the last man. And my sister." Raylan's voice was dangerously calm, the kind of quiet rumble that promised violence. Nyx swallowed hard. "There were no survivors, my king. Not Lyanna nor her mate. We found evidence of dark magic poisoned blades," Xander added. "This was a carefully orchestrated assassination." Raylan closed his eyes, clenching his fists so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His sister, his vibrant, laughing sister, was gone, murdered. and her son, 5-year-old Kalen, was missing. The boy was in his wolf form, as is custom during travel through the wilds. Xander continued. There are smaller tracks leading away from the carnage. Raylan's mind raced. It's possible he escaped during the fight, he said. The traitors would have pursued him. He paused. I felt the severing of my sister's life force through the royal bloodline. The boy must have been weakened by the shock. He would have followed the faintest trace of the royal bloodline, desperate, gut-wrenching instinct leading him to the Crimson Fang pack, a pack known for its brutal alpha and lack of discipline. The perfect place for a wounded pup to get lost. Or to be silenced, Raylan muttered, his golden eyes snapping open, blazing with cold fury. The traitors are closer than we think. They expected Kalen to perish in the wild or be killed by the first wolf he came across. Raylan continued, his voice low and dangerous. They would never expect him to be found by her. Xander and Nyx exchanged a confused glance. Her, my king? Nyx asked, his voice thick with disbelief. A scentless Omega. Raylan answered, his gaze unwavering. The pack ignores her. She is beneath their notice, and because of that, she may be the only person I can trust. The traitors will be looking for a royal pup. They'll search among the strong, the ambitious, but they will never think to look in the hovel of a nobody. Raylan's plan began to form a dangerous, sharp strategy. He couldn't simply march in and take Kalen. The assassins were watching. Any overt move would expose the prince's survival and put him in even more danger. He needed subtlety. He needed to get close to the Omega, using her invisibility as a shield. The next morning, news spread like wildfire through the Crimson Fang pack. The Alpha King is here, the pack whispered in shock. Raylan, the Black Wolf of the North, the king who had united the territories through sheer force of will, was in their territory. Alpha Thorn puffed out his chest, trying to appear calm, but the anxious, frantic scent that clung to him betrayed his unease. It's an honor, Your Majesty, Thorn said, bowing low. To what do we owe the pleasure of your unexpected visit? Raylan's piercing gaze swept over the assembled pack, cold and calculating. I'm touring the northern packs. He lied smoothly, his voice firm with authority. I'm assessing their strength, their loyalty. His eyes locked onto Vexa at the edge of the crowd where she had been forced to stand. She was trying to shrink away to become invisible. But his gaze was like a weight pinning her in place. For the first time, someone of importance was looking directly at her, and it made her feel like a trapped animal, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. Raylan saw the fear in her pale gray eyes, but also the faint smudge of dirt on her cheek and the determined set of her jaw. He needed to approach her to speak with her, but he had to do it without causing suspicion. I'll be staying for a few days, he announced to the pack, his voice commanding. I'll observe your training, your hunts, your hierarchy. Do not let me disturb your daily routines. But his very presence shattered their routine like a meteor strike, throwing everything into chaos. Later that day, as Vexa scrubbed pots in the communal kitchen, Kyra and her friends cornered her. Look at this, Kyra sneered, knocking a bucket of dirty water over Vexa's feet. The little ghost. I heard you took that pathetic scrap of a wolf home with you, one of her friends mocked. Planning to start a collection of broken things, they all laughed. The useless and the weak. Vexa didn't respond. She just kept her head down, her hands raw from scrubbing. She had grown accustomed to their cruelty. But now it felt different. She had something to protect. Kalen was waiting for her. He was depending on her. As she finally finished her chores and turned to leave, a figure stepped in her way. It was Raylan. He stood tall, a mountain of quiet power, his presence so overwhelming it seemed to drain the air from the room. Kyra and the others immediately fell silent, lowering their heads in submission. Raylan's golden eyes were fixed on Vexa. He inhaled deeply, his brow furrowing slightly. It was true. She had no scent, nothing. It was unnerving. Omega. he said, his voice low and commanding, vibrating through her. I need a guide to the outer territories tomorrow at dawn. Someone who knows the quiet paths. Alpha Thorn tells me you often forage there, he added. Vexa's head snapped up in shock. The king was speaking directly to her, asking something of her. Her mouth went dry. She could only manage a jerky nod. Be ready, he commanded, then swept past her, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Kyra stared at Vexa, her eyes narrowed with a venomous mix of jealousy and suspicion. The king, who had barely acknowledged her before, had just singled her out, the scentless Omega. It didn't make sense. And in the world of wolves, anything that didn't make sense was dangerous. The forest was eerily quiet at dawn, shrouded in a soft gray mist. Vexa moved with the practiced steps of someone used to being unnoticed. Behind her, King Raylan moved with a predatory grace, his steps silent, yet his presence was like a physical weight on her shoulders. She was acutely aware of every breath he took, every rustle of his leather armor. She had left Kaelin hidden in her hovel, nestled beneath the floorboards and covered by her blanket. The pup had whimpered, his sky-blue eyes begging her not to leave. It nearly shattered her heart. But a command from the king was not something that could be ignored. Tell me about your pack, Raylan said, suddenly his voice breaking into her worried thoughts. There's not much to tell, my king. Vexa answered softly, her gaze fixed on the ground. We are strong. Alpha Thorn is a good leader. The lie felt bitter in Vexa's mouth. Is he? Raylan's voice held a skeptical edge. A good leader cares for every member of his pack, the strong and the weak. He doesn't cast anyone aside. Vexa flinched at his words. They struck too close to her heart. Did he know? Had he seen how they treated her? She dared to glance at him. His expression was a mask of cold authority impossible to read. They walked in silence for a while longer before Raylan stopped beside a stream. His voice dropped lower, sending a chill through her. The pup you rescued. Where did you find him? The question felt like an ice spear through her chest. This was it. This was what he wanted. He knows about Kaelin. Just at the edge of the clearing, Your Majesty, she stammered. He was alone, injured. Show me where you have him. Raylan said, his tone cold and commanding. It wasn't a request. Panic gripped her heart like a vice, the cold primal fear creeping in. What would the king do? The pack would cast out a weak pup. They would see Kaelin as a burden, just another life unworthy of saving. She thought of his trusting blue eyes, the way he had huddled close to her for warmth. No. The word slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Raylan's head snapped toward her. His golden eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint flickering in their depths. You refuse a command from your king. His voice dropped to a growl. Vexa trembled, but she stood her ground. He is just a pup. He's weak. Please, my king, don't harm him. He's been through enough. A strange look crossed Raylan's face. It wasn't anger, more like surprised astonishment. This scentless Omega, this powerless outcast who flinched if another wolf even looked at her, was now standing up to him for a stray. He took a step closer, his towering form overshadowing her. Your loyalty to a creature you've known for one day is admirable, he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. But you are mistaken. He paused, his gaze sharp. I have no intention of harming him. He lowered his voice just enough for her to hear. That pup is my nephew, Prince Kaelin. He is the sole survivor of an attack that killed my sister. The world seemed to tilt beneath Vexa's feet. Kaelin, a prince. The ambush, the assassins. The pieces of the puzzle tumbled together in her mind. The small broken creature she had rescued wasn't just a stray wolf. He was the heir to the throne. And Vexa, this rejected Omega, was now sheltering a royal fugitive. The danger crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The traitors who killed his mother are still out there, Raylan continued, his voice urgent, shedding its royal formality. They're likely within your pack. They're looking for him. They think he's just another stray pup who will die on his own. Your anonymity, your status as an outcast is the only thing keeping him safe. Do you understand? Vexa nodded, her body numb with shock. Take me to him now. Her mind was spinning as she led Raylan back to her hovel, her heart hammering in her chest. When she pulled back the floorboards, Kalen looked up. His ears perked up and he let out a happy yip at the sight of her. But when his eyes landed on Raylan, his entire demeanor shifted. Ignoring his splintered leg, Kalen scrambled toward the king, whining and nudging his head against Raylan's massive leg. Raylan knelt, his armored figure softening for the first time as he gently stroked his nephew's head. Kalen, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. You're safe. The pup whined again, then turned to look back at Vexa, nudging her hand with his nose before turning back to Raylan, as if to unite them. The gesture was unmistakable. She saved me. She's with us. Raylan's gaze locked onto Vexa. He saw the truth in that simple gesture. This Omega had not only saved his nephew's life, she had earned his trust, his loyalty. The traitors can't know he's here, Raylan said, his strategic mind kicking into gear. I can't take him with me. It would reveal that he's alive and make him a target for a full-scale attack. He's safest here with you, hidden in plain sight, he added. Vexa's voice barely rose above a whisper. Yes. Raylan glanced around her small bare hovel. But not here. This isn't suitable. He strode out of the hovel, and Vexa's heart raced as she followed him. Raylan strode straight into the heart of the pack's main clearing, where Alpha Thorn and the others had begun their morning training. His voice rang out, powerful and commanding. Alpha Thorn, Raylan, called his words carrying the weight of authority. Every wolf froze in place. Thorn scrambled forward, lowering his head in respect. Yes, Your Majesty. Raylan's gaze swept over the gathered pack, his eyes stopping when they landed on Vexa, standing at the edge, uncertain, almost invisible behind him. This Omega Raylan, declared his voice echoing with the force of his will, has earned my favor. She will no longer live in the hovel at the edge of the woods. You will provide her quarters in the main den. She will sit at the high table with you. Anything she needs will be provided. She is under my direct protection. Is that understood? A collective gasp rippled through the pack. Thorn's face drained of color as he stared, his jaw slack in disbelief. Kyra's face twisted into a venomous mask of pure rage. Elevating the scentless Omega, the ghost, to such a position of honor was unthinkable. Raylan's gaze dared anyone to challenge him. No one will enter her quarters without my permission. No one will question her. Anyone who harms her or shows disrespect will answer directly to me. He turned his back on the stunned pack and faced Vexa. Her face was pale with shock, her body still trembling. Raylan had just put a target on her back, but at the same time he had surrounded her with an impenetrable wall of his own power. It was a dangerous yet necessary gambit. Keep him safe, he murmured softly, his voice just for her ears. Your life and the future of the throne depends on it. Vexa's life changed overnight. She was moved from the dilapidated shack at the pack's edge to a warm, dry chamber within the main den, usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. She was served food from the Alpha's own table, rich tender cuts of meat and fresh bread. Wolves who had once ignored her now turned away in fear and confusion. They didn't understand her new status, and their fear turned to hostility. Whispers followed her everywhere. Kyra was the most openly venomous. I don't know how you tricked the king, you scentless freak, Kyra hissed one evening, cornering Vexa near the hearth. But he'll tire of his new pet, and when he leaves, you'll have no one to protect you. Vexa didn't rise to the bait. She simply met Kyra's hateful glare with a quiet calm she hadn't known before. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She had purpose now. In her new chambers, hidden in a fur-lined basket, was the prince. Kalen, the royal heir, slept peacefully. Raylan used his official duties as an excuse to stay near her. He'd summon her to guide him on patrols or consult her knowledge of local herbs. Those were thin pretexts, but they allowed him moments alone with her and Kaelin. During these stolen moments, Raylan saw the real Vexa. He saw how gently she changed Kaelin's bandages, her touch soft and sure. He saw the fierce protective light in her eyes when anyone came too close to her chambers. He heard her soft melodic voice as she told Kaelin stories of the stars and the ancient wolf spirits. Vexa was kind, intelligent, and held a deep inner strength forged by years of cruelty. Raylan found himself sharing things with her he had never told anyone secrets about: the weight of his crown, the grief over his sister's death, and his fear for Kaelin's future. She listened intently, her gray eyes full of profound empathy that went beyond words. In her quiet presence, the lonely king found peace. One evening, Raylan arrived at Vexa's chambers to check on Kaelin. The pup was sleeping soundly, his leg healing well. Vexa was mending a tear in the blanket she had made for him. The room was filled with a peaceful silence, the kind that settled deep in your bones. "He's doing well because of you," Raylan said softly, his eyes on her delicate hands as she worked. "You have a gift." Vexa didn't look up from her task. "It's not a gift to be an Omega, my king," she replied quietly. "It's a burden." Raylan stepped closer, his presence overpowering. "I don't see a burden," he said, his voice rich with conviction. "I see strength. I see courage that outshines every warrior in this pack." As he drew nearer, something strange happened. For the first time, Raylan caught a scent. It was faint, nearly undetectable, but it was there. It wasn't the scent of an Omega, a Beta, or any wolf he had ever known. It smelled like damp earth after a storm, like wild moonflowers, opening only in the dead of night. The scent was the most captivating thing he had ever encountered, and it called to something deep within him, something primal and possessive. His wolf, the fierce, dominant force inside him, stirred. Made it growled inside his mind. Raylan froze, his eyes widening in shock. It was impossible. A scentless Omega could not have a mate. Not the fated mate of the Alpha King. The mating scent was a powerful, undeniable force, a pheromonal bond, forged by destiny itself, and yet he was smelling it on her. Vexa looked up, sensing the sudden tension in him. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Raylan couldn't speak. He could only stare at her, his mind spinning. Her scentlessness, it wasn't a curse. It was a veil, a shield that had hidden her true nature from the world. Her bloodline wasn't weak. It was dormant and ancient and powerful, hidden for generations. And now, in the presence of its fated match, it was beginning to awaken. That explained everything: her quiet strength, her fierce loyalty, the way his soul seemed to settle in her presence. Just then, Kaelin stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft whimper. Vexa immediately went to him, her touch gentle as she stroked his fur and murmured soothing words. The pup quieted instantly at her touch. Watching her, Raylan knew. Fated mate or not, this quiet, rejected Omega had already captured his heart. The political implications of it all barely registered in his mind compared to the overwhelming certainty of his feelings. He had come to it with a pack seeking a lost prince and a hidden traitor. Instead, he had found a queen. But this revelation brought with it a new terrifying danger. If her scent was awakening, others might eventually sense it too. And if the traitors found out that the scentless Omega wasn't just protecting the prince, but was also the king's fated mate, she would become their primary target. Raylan had to end this. He had to find the traitor, and he had to do it now. Raylan's investigation into the pack grew more intense. His golden eyes missed nothing. He put the entire pack under a suffocating level of scrutiny, staging brutal training exercises, pushing warriors to their limits, watching for any sign of weakness, any flicker of deception. He knew the traitor was close. The attack on his sister's carriage had been too well timed, the location too precise. It had to be someone with inside knowledge, of royal movements. His primary suspect was Alpha Thorn. Thorn was ambitious, arrogant, and clearly chafed under Raylan's authority. He had the motive, the power, and the opportunity. Raylan set a trap. Raylan let it slip just enough for it to be overheard that he would be taking his new favorite Omega on a long ride to inspect the northern border, leaving the den relatively unguarded. It was a calculated lie. He and his royal guards would circle back, hidden in the shadows, waiting. The bait was Vexa herself. He hated using her, hated putting her in even the slightest danger, but she had insisted. They see me as a weakness, she had told him the night before, her voice firm. Let them. We'll use their prejudice against them. The next day, as Raylan and Vexa rode out, the pack's atmosphere turned thick with tension. Kyra watched them leave, her face a storm of jealousy. Thorn gave a brief nod, his expression unreadable. But it was Jarek Thorn's quiet, unassuming second-in-command who offered Vexa a small, almost imperceptible smile. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, a lone figure slipped silently through the woods toward Vexa's chambers. It wasn't Thorn. The figure moved with a deadly grace that the brutish Alpha could never achieve. Raylan and his guards, hidden in the trees, watched as the assassin entered the den. They gave him a minute before they moved, silent as death. They stormed into the chambers, expecting to catch the traitor red-handed, but the room was empty. A hidden passage behind a loose stone in the fireplace was wide open. "He's going for the pup!" Raylan snarled, his heart pounding with terror. The assassin hadn't been targeting Vexa on the ride. He'd been waiting for her to leave so he could get to Kaelin. They rushed into the narrow, dark tunnel that led deep beneath the den. The sounds of a struggle echoed ahead, a snarl, a yelp of pain, and a fierce feminine cry of rage. They burst into a small subterranean chamber to find chaos. The assassin, his face hidden, had Kaelin cornered. But Vexa was standing between them. She hadn't gone on the ride. A terrible premonition had made her double back, hiding herself in her own rooms. She gripped a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, her knuckles white, her body trembling, but her eyes blazed with a protective fury that transformed her. "Get away from him," she screamed. The assassin, surprised by her sudden presence, lunged toward her. But Kaelin, despite his injured leg, launched himself at the man's ankle, sinking his puppy teeth into the flesh. The distraction gave Vexa the opening she needed. She swung the poker with all her strength, striking the assassin's arm and forcing him to drop the poisoned dagger he had been holding. At that moment, Raylan and his guards descended. The fight was brutal but brief. The assassin was skilled, but no match for the Alpha King and his elite warriors. Within seconds, he was disarmed and slammed against the stone wall. His hood was torn away, revealing his face. The pack stood frozen in stunned silence as Raylan dragged the traitor into the main hall. It wasn't Thorn. It was Jarek, the quiet one, the loyal one. Why Thorn demanded his face drained of color. He was a brute, but he wasn't a traitor. Jarek spat on the floor, his eyes burning with deep ancestral hatred. "His family built their throne on the bones of my ancestors," he snarled, his gaze locked on Raylan. "The Shadowman clan was here long before your crowned usurpers. Lord Varric promised me my birthright. He promised me this pack and the head of this so-called king." Raylan's mind clicked into place. Varric, the ambitious, scheming lord who controlled the Western territories, was the mastermind. Jarek was his inside man. Jarek's hateful gaze shifted to Vexa. "And you?" He sneered, the little ghost. "He's going to make you his queen. A scentless nothing. Lord Varric will peel the skin from your bones for what you've done tonight." Before anyone could react, Raylan moved. In a blur of motion, he crossed the distance between them and clamped his hand around Jarek's throat. A terrifying, inhuman growl ripped from Raylan's chest, an utter roar of possessive fury. His golden eyes glowed with a feral intensity. "You will never speak to her again," he thundered. His voice a tidal wave of alpha command that forced every wolf in the room, including Thorn, to their knees. "You will never look at her again. You threatened my mate. You threatened my heir. Your life is forfeit." The sickening snap of bone echoed in the horrified silence of the hall. Raylan dropped the lifeless body, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. His furious gaze swept over the trembling pack before locking on Vexa. He strode toward her, ignoring the blood, the gasps of the crowd. He reached out his hand, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. The feral rage in his eyes softened into something far more dangerous, tender, fierce, and all-consuming. "He will never hurt you again," he promised, his voice low and intimate, meant only for her. "No one will." In that moment, standing over the body of a traitor, surrounded by a terrified pack, Raylan publicly laid his claim. The ghost was his, and the entire world would know it. The aftermath of Jarek's treason and public execution was a storm of fear and chaos. The Crimson Fang pack was fractured, their leadership shattered. Raylan sent Xander and Nyx with a detachment of royal guards to the Western Territories to arrest his cousin Lord Varric, knowing a civil war might be on the horizon. But his immediate concern was not the throne. It was Vexa standing before him with wide, shocked eyes and something in them that he dared hope wasn't fear. He led her away from the hall, away from prying eyes and terrified whispers, taking her to a secluded balcony that overlooked the moonlit forest. The cool night air felt like balm on his heated skin. "Vexa," he said her name, feeling foreign, yet perfectly right on his tongue. He had always called her Omega, but now it was Vexa. She looked up at him, her arms wrapped around herself. You called me your mate," she said, her voice soft, not accusatory, but laced with disbelief. "I did," Raylan answered, turning fully to face her, his massive frame blocking out the world. "Because you are." He explained everything. The faint scent of moonflowers and rain that only he could smell. How his soul recognized hers. He told her about the ancient bloodlines, some so rare they were thought to be extinct, that possessed unique traits like the ability to mask their scent until their fated mate was near. "You are not cursed, Vexa," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "You were hidden. Your bloodline protected itself, waiting. Your scentlessness wasn't a weakness, it was a shield." Vexa listened, her mind struggling to accept his words. Her entire life, her very identity, had been built on the belief that she was worthless. To be told that what made her an outcast was actually a sign of a rare and powerful heritage, well, it shattered everything she had known. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I am no one, a rejected Omega. You are the king. Your Luna should be a pure-blooded alpha, someone who can bring strength to your reign. Do you think I care for blood status?" Raylan asked, his voice gentle as he took her cold hands in his. "I've been surrounded by purebloods my whole life. I've seen their ambition, their treachery, their weakness. In you, I've seen more strength and courage than in my entire royal guard. You stood against a trained assassin, armed with nothing but a fireplace poker to protect my nephew. You defied me, your king, for what you believed was right. You showed compassion when your entire pack showed nothing but cruelty. That is the strength I need in a queen. That is the strength I want in my mate." Tears welled up in Vexa's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sorrow, but of a deep, shattering release. For the first time in her life, someone saw her, truly saw her, not as a ghost or a burden, but as someone worthy. "The world won't accept it," she choked out, voicing the fear that had haunted her for years. "They will call you weak for choosing me. Let them." Raylan growled, his possessive nature flaring. He stepped closer, his large hands framing her face, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. "Your pack rejected you. My cousin tried to murder my family. I am done caring about the opinions of lesser wolves. My world has been a cold, lonely place, Vexa," he continued, his voice softening, yet heavy with truth. "A fortress of duty and power. You are the first warmth I've felt in years. I will not let you go." He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers. "I am not choosing you out of pity or gratitude," he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. "I'm choosing you because without you, my kingdom is just land, and my crown is just a piece of metal. You are my mate, my Luna, my everything, Sima, my everything." And then he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of royal possession, but one of complete surrender. It started gentle, tentative, and deepened, as Vexa, hesitant at first, finally responded. The kiss tasted of the forest's power of years of longing and loneliness finally being released. For Vexa, it was as if a dam had broken. Every moment of isolation, every cruel word, every night spent aching in loneliness was washed away in the flood of his kiss. The faint scent of moonflowers that had always haunted Raylan erupted from her skin, no longer hidden, but a fragrant cloud that enveloped them both. It was the scent of belonging, of home. Her bloodline was waking up, answering the call of its fated mate, a final beautiful confirmation of their bond. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless Raylan's golden eyes were filled with a love so fierce it took Vexa's breath away. The Alpha King, the Black Wolf of the North, the most feared and powerful male in the territories, was hers. And she, the scentless Omega, was his. "They will not just accept you," he vowed, his voice thick with unwavering conviction. "They will worship you." Raylan was true to his word. He didn't ask for the pack's acceptance. He commanded it. The next day he convened a formal assembly. He stood before the Crimson Fang pack, his presence more imposing than ever. But this time Vexa was not standing at the edge of the crowd. She was by his side at his right hand, where a Luna should be. Raylan stripped a pale, trembling thorn of his alpha status, citing his negligence, his failure to protect the young and the weak, and his inability to root out the treason festering within his own ranks. He didn't kill him, but demoted him, a fate many wolves considered worse than death. The pack was left leaderless, humbled. Raylan then turned his attention to Vexa. "This is Vexa of the Moonflower Bloom," he announced, his voice ringing with power and pride. The name was new, a heritage he was bestowing upon her until her own was revealed. "She is not a ghost. She is not a curse. She is from an ancient and noble bloodline that has chosen to reveal itself. Now she is my fated mate, your Luna Queen." Raylan held up her hand, their fingers intertwining. "She saved the life of your prince when all of you turned your backs. Her compassion is a weapon. Her courage is a shield. Her heart is the heart of this kingdom. You did not see her value, and for that your pack has been brought to its knees." Raylan's voice thundered through the hall, his command undeniable. "From this day forward you will show her the respect she is owed. You will bow to your queen." One by one, the wolves of the Crimson Fang pack lowered their heads. For the first time they truly saw Vexa. No longer the scentless Omega they had ignored, but the woman who had tamed the heart of the Alpha King. They saw the golden light of his favor surrounding her, a protective aura far more intimidating than any display of physical power. Kyra, her face a mixture of horror and awe, was the last to bow her submission, complete and undeniable. The rejection was over. News from the West arrived a week later. Lord Varric, confronted by the testimony of his captured co-conspirators and the might of the royal guard at his gates, surrendered without a fight. The civil war that had been brewing was crushed before it could even begin. Raylan's reign was more secure than ever. With his heir safe and the traitors dealt with, he could finally focus on securing the future. Raylan didn't stay with the Crimson Fang pack. He took Vexa and Kaelin and returned to the royal citadel, a magnificent fortress carved deep into the heart of a mountain. The royal court was stunned by his choice of mate, but no one dared voice dissent. They saw the way the king looked at her with an adoration so fierce that it promised death to anyone who would dare to harm her. They saw how young Prince Kaelin adored her, never straying far from her side. Vexa thrived in her new role. The quiet Omega, who once scrubbed pots, was now a wise and compassionate queen. She fought for the rights of the weak reformed, the cruel laws that once governed the pack and established sanctuaries for orphan pups. She didn't rule through fear, but through love, and the kingdom flourished under their joint reign, the lion and the dove. Her scent, a unique blend of moonflowers and petals, became a symbol of hope and the dawning of a new era. Years later, Queen Vexa stood on the same balcony where Raylan had first kissed her. He came up behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Below them, a teenage Kaelin was playfully sparring with the other young wolves, his laughter echoing through the valley. He was strong and healthy, his mother's gentle eyes and his uncle's fierce spirit shining through. "What are you thinking about?" Raylan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I was thinking about the rain," she answered softly, a smile playing on her lips, "and a little broken pup that no one wanted." Everyone ignored him. Raylan's voice softened, full of love. "Except the one person who mattered, the strongest heart in the kingdom." She leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, the contentment settling in her bones. She was no longer a shadow, no longer a ghost. She was a queen, a mate, a mother. She was loved. As she gazed out at the kingdom she had helped build, she understood sometimes the greatest strength isn't found in a roar, but in the quiet courage to save a life that everyone else has cast aside. 5 years had passed since Raylan and Vexa united the kingdom. The royal citadel, once a cold place of duty for the king, was now a true home, warm and full of laughter. Kaelin, now a strong, broad-shouldered young man of 20, was the pride of the royal guard. His loyalty to Raylan and Vexa was absolute. He was the perfect heir, embodying his uncle's strength and his adoptive mother's compassion. The greatest joy in their lives was Princess Lyanna. She was 5 years old, a whirlwind of energy, with her father's molten gold eyes and a spirit that could not be contained. She was adored by her parents and her older brother. The kingdom at last was at peace. But as Lyanna's 5th naming day approached, the day of her formal presentation to the pack, the air in the royal citadel began to grow heavy. The old familiar tension began creeping back into the stone walls. The whispers Vexa thought had been silenced forever were returning. Lyanna, like her mother before her, was scentless. Vexa first noticed it when the other pups in the royal nursery began to shy away from her daughter, just as they once shied away from Vexa. They weren't cruel, not yet, but they were confused. Lyanna was a void, a blank space in their scent-driven world, and it unsettled them. Vexa sat with Raylan in his vast study, the moon casting long shadows across the stone floor. "They're afraid, Raylan," she said softly, her voice laced with an old familiar tremor. "They accepted me as a miracle, a one-time anomaly, blessed by the moon goddess for her fated king. But to see it again in Lyanna, they see it as a flaw, a curse I've passed on to the royal bloodline." Raylan's face hardened, his jaw set in determination. "Then they are fools," he declared, his voice low but firm. "Our daughter is perfect. I will not let her suffer the same ignorance you endured." "They don't see it as ignorance," Vexa countered, rising from her chair to pace by the window. "They see it as a threat. Lord Vorlog and the Elder Council have requested a formal meeting. They want to discuss the presentation. They want assurances." Raylan's growl was low, a dangerous rumble that filled the room. Assurances. The next day the Council of Elders assembled. Lord Vorlog, a scarred old wolf whose lineage predated Raylan's, acted as their spokesman. He bowed deeply, but his eyes were cold, offering no warmth. "Your Majesties," he began, his voice gravelly, "the kingdom thrives under your rule. The Lunar Queen's compassion is known to all, but this matter of the princess, it is a great concern. Speak plainly." Vorlog Raylan commanded, his fingers tapping a warning rhythm on the arm of his throne. Vorlog straightened, taking a calculated risk. The queen's condition was accepted as a sacred mystery, a veil placed by the goddess that only our king could lift. But the princess, your majesty, is a child. She has no mate to awaken her. Her scentlessness is seen by the people as the return of the old blight. They fear the bloodline is not blessed, but diluted, weakened. Vexa's hands clenched at the folds of her gown. My daughter is not weak. Forgive me, my Queen Vorlog said, though his tone was far from apologetic. But a wolf without a scent has no rank, no authority. How can she one day help lead a pack when the pack cannot even sense her? He paused, letting the insult linger in the air before delivering his final blow. The council requests that at the presentation, a ritual of awakening be performed, an ancient rite to cleanse the princess, to force her wolf to the surface. A deadly silence fell. Vexa knew of this ritual. It was brutal, terrifying, a procedure designed to shock a pup's dormant senses, a method full of pain and fear. It was barbaric. No, Vexa said, her voice soft, but laced with the unbreakable steel of a mother's resolve. My queen, it is for the good of the kingdom, Vorlog pressed. I said no, she snapped, rising from her throne. She descended the dais, standing directly before the elder. The scent of moonflowers and rain flooded the room suddenly. An overwhelming wave of power that pushed Vorlog back a step. It was no longer faint. It was a potent territorial declaration. You will not lay a hand on my daughter, Vexa said, her voice steady with authority. You speak of weakness, Lord Vorlog, but you are blind. My bloodline is not a void. It is a shield, and you are about to see what happens when that shield is threatened. Raylan watched his mate with burning pride in his chest. The wolf who had once hidden in the shadows was now a furious protective queen, ready to tear the world apart to protect her child. The battle for her own acceptance was over. The war for her daughter's future had only just begun. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Vexa and King Raylan. The narrator's voice echoed. Their story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to show compassion when no one else will. It's the resilience to keep a gentle heart in a cruel world, and the proof that the one who is rejected by the crowd may just be the one destined to rule them. We hope their story touched your heart and reminded you of the hidden power that lies in kindness. If you enjoyed this werewolf romance drama, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. Don't forget to share this story with a friend who loves tales of fated mates and unexpected heroes. And for more epic stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.